I'm Johnny Decimal Noble, and I'm about to have a productive conversation with Mike Vardy.
Johnny, thanks so much for joining me today. It's the strangest hyphenate I've ever heard for a last name on the show.
I tend to put it in single quotes. Johnny
Yes,
Decimal.
fair enough. Not double quotes. Nonetheless, Johnny, thanks so much for taking the time to join me today. Have a productive conversation around. I love frameworks. I'm still nerdy about them. I'm nerdy about productivity systems and approaches and things that will help people get more of the right things done. There's no shortage of them out there, right? You know, the bullet journal method, time crafting, which I talk about, getting things done, the time sector that Carl Pauline talks about. There's so many. And I want to get into why did you, and I know you've probably shared this before, but why did you feel the need with so many different ones out there to not only craft your own, but then put it out into the world? And I know I'm a bit of a hypocrite here because I've done the same thing, but I'm just curious because I think that is there enough room at the inn?
Yeah, mine started in a funny way. Mine started from vanity, actually. Mine started from, it goes way back to 2010. We were running a dance production. I'm an IT professional by trade, worked in IT all my life. And it was one of those situations where we started helping friends who were running this. Started helping friends who were running this, in hindsight, crazy dance production. And I quit my job at a bank and we started doing this thing and we had a cool office and what have you. And I wanted to put on the walls of the office a nice printed PDF of ticket prices, which I'd have made up all nice. It was looked pretty. And I hated the thought of putting at the bottom of that thing one of those file paths where, you have to describe where the document is so you can find it again if you want to edit it. And I didn't want to put /users_John/documents/ all that nonsense that people used to do. And I thought I really would like a short way of referencing this thing. And so I accidentally, I think, came up with this system. There was no design in the original days of Johnny Decimal. There was a very real requirement to organize a bunch of people who were working together in an office and working semi-remotely, and Dropbox was quite new then, so we had this cool shared file system. And there was a very real need to just come up with a way of organizing that. And I've always had this kind of organizey brain. I think we're similar ages. I'm 50 this year, so I grew up in the days of pre-PC. My first computer was a Sinclair Spectrum, which British people will know. Yeah, right. Sinclair Spectrum.
I'm aware.
Yeah, and then I had an Amiga and all that sort of stuff. So, and I used to.
Which Amiga did you have?
Things I remember.
Hold on, because I had an Amiga too. Which one did you have?
The original Amiga 500.
I had the 1000.
Was my second computer, and then I got that upgraded thanks to my parents' generosity with the extra memory to make it an Amiga 1000.
Yeah, the 1000 memory. So the 500 was the cool one. It looked cool. The 1000 looked like what would be normally a traditional, because the 500 was the keyboard was the computer. Like it was all kind of, very much like the Texas Instruments style, but nonetheless.
The whole module,
yeah. I wanted an Apple at the time. Could not get it with Amiga instead. And that was totally fine.
I'd never heard of Apple back then, back in the UK. We had a fairly thriving industry. Of course, we had the BBC Micro in the UK as well. We had a pretty thriving industry of local computers. Anyway, what I used to make on my early computers when I was basically a boy were little databases. And I used to catalog the contents of my room and stuff. And so that's obviously always just been in me somehow.
Mm-hmm.
And so fast forward to this dance production thing, and I came up with this series of numbers, and we used it very successfully in this dance production. And then I didn't really think about it at all for many years. And that was 2010. Funnily enough, all through the 2010s, me and friends who I was working with, I remember having these sort of meetings where we'd get together after work and try and figure out a thing to do, a business, the idea to get us away from our day jobs.
Mm-hmm.
And Johnny Decimal never came up. It was never even an idea, which is kind of strange. And it took all the way. I had a few fledgling websites. You can find them on the Wayback Machine. I started with a Squarespace sometime probably around 2017, I guess. And then a few other iterations of a website. And I think the thing that really kicked it off was a conversation about 5 years ago where a guy, shout out to Jack Batty and Andrew Canyon, two guys who are also online. Andrew's got a podcast. Jack Batty's well known online. And I got an email from Jack saying, hey, there's a few guys talking online about Johnny Decimal, and we need somewhere to talk about your system, and there isn't one. And Jack, at the time I was working in this job and I was super busy, hectic job, and I had no time to think. And Jack set my forum up for me and paid for it with his own credit card.
Wow.
Yeah, right. And so talk about having love from a community. And that's how the forum started. And that, after I saw these people gathering around this thing, so I mean, we're now in 2020, really late, right? And I had no interest in PKM. I was just working. I had an IT consultant's job and I was just really busy. So I wasn't into this stuff at all. And then when the forum started getting traction, I thought, hang about, this is a thing. And then I started taking the website more seriously. And then I started a Discord and I rebuilt the website, and it just snowballed from there until coming on for 3 years ago now. It was May 2023. I was going to work the next day. It was Sunday night. I was in bed with my partner, Lucy. And I said, I get a little bit emotional thinking about it. I said to her, hey, I'd really like to quit my job tomorrow. I really just don't want to go in. And I'd realized that by then, this Johnny Decimal thing was definitely something that was a serious idea. I realized there was really something on it. There was meat on those bones. And so Lucy, God love her, she said, we had a long conversation. I went in the next day, quit my job. And that was the beginning. And then honestly had no idea. I literally quit my job the next day with no plan. So that was probably foolish. Advice to younger people, save a little bit of money before you do that.
Yeah,
but
same,
whatever. Hey,
same. I did the
feel
same
the
thing.
vibe and
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah. Oh yeah. I quit my job at Costco without having a total plan. And then when I quit my other job, so I quit that job to really focus on writing and kind of develop what I was working on. But then when I actually decided to go full time with the work I do now, that one was a little bit easier because, number one, we were getting parental leave because our son was just born. So again, living in Canada, and I know in other parts of the world, this is something that guys can do. I was able to take the time off and really focus on the business. But yeah, your advice is well placed. If you have any inkling that you don't want to stay in that job and the job is a means to an end and you have something that you want to explore, saving money is a good idea, or even just whittling down to part-time or something like that so that you can devote time. But a wholesale quit, you better have the right partner with you to be able to do that. So kudos to your partner.
We got lucky. And I think as well that if you make the decision to quit, that's often as good as actually quitting. And had I worked for 3 more months and saved a bunch of money, knowing fine well that I had a date in mind, mentally that probably would have been the same thing. But anyway, there you go.
Sure.
So that was almost 3 years ago, and here we are.
This sounds, again, when I talked to Ryder Carroll, who created the Bullet Journal, very similar. And even, Mike Rohde, who's the Daily Plan Bar, and my PM Talks podcast partner, Patrick Rohn, this idea of building these systems for ourselves and then them taking flight with others. That has happened. I mean, that's how Tiago Forte got started too. All of us, David Allen, Merlin Mann with the hipster PDA, realizing. And I think this is why there's space, is because there are so many systems out there, frameworks, approaches, etc. And there is no objective way to work for every single person. And what I found fascinating about the Johnny Decimal system is the PKM-esque, early PKM-esque kind of stuff, looking at this through this would work well in Workflowy. It would work well in Obsidian. There's a Reddit thread that we'll link to in the show notes that talks about and again, you're in this Reddit thread, you're having people go, yep, this works exactly like it does for most people. No, I've had to make some fine tuning. Nope, this doesn't work for me. I tried it and I abandoned it. Right. But the idea of walking through this, I think, is really interesting because there's this hierarchy. And Can you share a little? I mean, we're going to obviously link to help people get a real understanding of it, but the hierarchy. Let's talk about it, but then let's explain maybe the iterations or the iterative process of coming up with that hierarchy, because I think that's where the sausage gets made, so to speak.
And I'll if you'll allow me, I'll start with the problem as I see it, which I think is it's kind of an invisible problem that has crept up on us. And I was just in the UK. It's just after Christmas now, and I was in the UK last Christmas, last week, talking to my dad, who in the late 1960s, he's now in his late 70s, as a civil servant, worked in one of the largest office complexes at the time in the world, up in the northeast of England. And in England, we call it a national insurance number. It's your social security number. It's the same thing, right? And it's a particular structure number, and that identifies you in the system. And this office complex of 10,000 people up in Newcastle in the UK, according to my dad's stories, was physically laid out per the structure of your national insurance number. And so if he needed to get the records for a person whose insurance number started 13, he would walk to section 13, and then he'd take a left where the next number, bifurcated the office with a series of filing cabinets. And because, of course, it's the late 1960s, everything's in paper. And the very structure of the office, and my dad as a civil servant, everybody understood the concepts of information management because you had to, because if you didn't, you never found anything.
Yeah.
And that's how the world has always been, going all the way back through time. You had to understand information management and just to be at least conscious of it. Well, then we invented computers. And I remember the beginning of my career was just about when I used to do migrations. My first job pretty much was migrating people from Windows 3 point something to Windows NT. So pretty early days of Windows in the corporate office. And that's when everybody, normal average people like my dad, started to use computers. And so, of course, we start having all these files on computers. And at that point, it's like we had this terrible collective amnesia, and everybody just forgot all of these organizing principles. And the problem with a computer is, I think we see it as an advantage, and I don't know if it is one. Computers will allow you to create anything anywhere you want.
Right.
People think that's brilliant, right? I think that's a terrible idea. And so we get onto the Johnny Decimal System, because the first point of the Johnny Decimal System, if you sit down in front of a Johnny Decimal System, the first point of it is that you are presented with at most, and when you design your own system, you try and design as few as possible. You don't try and use this many. You try and use as few as you can, because fewer decisions is better. You are presented with at most 10 areas, and they are the areas of your life. Let's say you're at home and you're on your computer, the areas of your life. And so you are not presented with 40 folders with ambiguous names, with stuff all over the place. You are presented with at most 10 choices. And those 10 choices should be unambiguous. So let's just say I've got one area of my life, and we put numbers at the front of these, but the numbers almost aren't important, I've come to realize. The numbers are helpful and help you stay within these constraints, but people get fixated on the numbers, and the numbers aren't the important thing. The important thing is the limitation of choice and the structure. So you sit down at your system, and let's say you've got 3 choices. You've got one called life administration. You've got another one called knitting and crafts, because that's your major hobby. And you've got another one called my home business. And you want to find your driving license, right? There's only one place. There's only one of those 3 things that your driving license can be in. And so the idea is you present yourself with as few choices as you can, and then you go into that area. And then I won't talk through the whole structure, because it would be probably a bit boring, but you make that choice one more time again in the level of categories, which categories are contained within areas. And now you're in a category of things. And within there, you've got a bunch of stuff which is by now very well defined. You've made a deliberate, conscious choice to get there. You're in a specific place. And that's basically it. We're really going back to the concepts, to fundamental concepts of information management. It's a library. I say to people, imagine a library without a catalog. That's just a room full of books now. That's not a useful library. And that's what Johnny Decimal gives you. It gives you a catalog for all the things in your life in a very simple structure.
It reminds me, again, like you bring up the file cabinet kind of metaphor, right? And so if you're looking at it from the vantage point of the area is the file cabinet, or maybe it's a series of file cabinets, right? And then the category would be the maybe the drawer, or
Perfect.
it could be the what do they call it? The hanger that keeps certain folders. And like, so again, there's like, it expands and contracts, right?
It's a really beautiful analogy, actually, and it's one that I use on my website. So
Mhm.
an area is a filing cabinet, a drawer is a category, and then we actually use manila folders as the example of the final, because there are only 3 levels. That's the next trick here, right?
Yeah.
You've got areas, they contain categories contain IDs, and that's it. You stop there. You
Mhm.
don't go any further in your organization. So it's very shallow and very approachable. And we make the analogy of manila folders, those hanging folders, to the IDs, and that's where your stuff is. So it's actually a really nice example.
Right. And it blends what I like about it is it blends, I mean, especially for Gen Xers or anybody older than that, it blends the analog and the digital, because you and I both, again, around the same age, we are digital, for lack of better terms, digital natives, maybe even digital refugees to a degree, depending on, how old you are. And my friend Steve Dotto would talk about this. He would say, like, people who were born and the computers didn't exist, they're learning this stuff. We were kind of born into it a bit. So we can bridge that gap as Gen X. So we know what it was like to go into a library and go, oh, like, here's a drawer, and oh, I've got to look up history, and this is the area that it's in. And what I think is interesting about this is that because it's personal, the exploration can only go so far. So the distinction I have is, like, if you were to go look at, again, go to a physical library, use the card catalog system, you go to, say, books on personal development. My word, there'll be innumerable amounts of those, because it's pulling from a bunch of different sources, not unlike generative AI does now. If you're asking it for information, it's going to pull from everything that it can see. But the distinction here is that it's pulling from what you've put there, right?
Yes, a very contained space, which actually makes, I'm just exploring how to use my system with AI, and it actually makes for a very interesting use case, because you now have this structured place in which to ask questions. And it's kind of an interesting, it's one of the objections to my system, which the elephant in the room is that it definitely isn't, like you said before, there's room in this world for many systems, because for sure, a lot of people don't like this thing. They find it limiting. But I think Johnny Decimal is useful to think about in the context of, I've never thought of myself as PKM, back to that early conversation about the origins. I was never a PKM nerd. I see Johnny Decimal more as personal records management. It's better for keeping track of really things like your driving license. People find it immensely useful for tracking things like healthcare, went to the doctor, have prescriptions, have all those sorts of records. And what it's not necessarily good at, and what it wasn't designed to handle, and what I don't recommend you use it for, is it's the kind of second brain idea where you're typing in ideas where you'd like to have lots of connections between ideas, and it's very loose. By definition, it isn't that. By definition, it isn't this loosely connected bunch of stuff. But as a result, you can have, I do actually have a space in my business system where I'm recording with the help of an LLM, which I've hooked up to this. I use Obsidian, which of course is just markdown files on disk. So that's really helpful to Claude Code.
Right.
And I've told it where in my system, using an ID, that the technical documentation for my website is, and I've got Claude hooking across to my system, because the last piece of the Johnny Decimal puzzle that I realized later on in the piece, because again, it wasn't designed, the whole thing was accidental, was the the secret sauce is what it was called the index for a while, and then we came up with we now call it the JDEX. It's more snappy, and that's my thing, right? The JDEX. And your JDEX is a really powerful concept because less so now, but I think people used to think of all of the stuff on their computer as the files. You go to the file system first, and that's your mental model of all the things on your computer. And that is less and less so now, to the point where I think we've really gone to the other side, where that is definitely not so, because you've got your email, you've got your calendar, you've got web services, you've got your to-do list, you've got your notes app. And so your index, the JDEX, is the place where you create these new IDs. When you want to create a new thing, you don't go to your file system and create a new folder.
Right.
You go to your JDEX, which is just a note in a notes app. I use Bear or Obsidian, or you can use Notion, you can use anything you like. And an index, an ID entry, when you create a new ID, you're just creating a new ID in your own system there, in your own Obsidian, say. And then if you need to, you go over to your file system and you create a folder, but you might not need to. You might go to your email and create a folder, or you might just have a note or whatever. So this note system, which is especially powerful when it's Obsidian because it's just markdown files on disk, is now the center of your digital life. And it's the thing that defines everything about your digital life. And the more you use that, the more powerful that becomes.
How, as we're going through this, you said it was accidental, and it's clearly shifted into incidental at this point, right? Like anything that you iterate is as a result of not just using it, but trusting it. And what's fascinating to me about looking at this is that you're using very, for lack of a better term, concrete elements, which are numeric, right? Area, category, ID, with stuff that's a bit more natural language, such as the title, right? And what I find interesting about that, and again, coming up with it was accidental, but incidentally, what this will help, I think, with, at least in terms of retention and access to this information, is you can trust the empirical stuff, the numbers, more than the titles. Because I think what's happened too is, especially with generative AI and all this stuff, and they're being built into these tools, is we start to look in a human way for the name of the thing. I'll give you a great example. This podcast, I was looking to share an episode on in my Lantern newsletter, and I wanted to share the Marshall Goldsmith episode. Not the one about AI, which we've done, but the one about the earned life. So my brain goes, I want to get the Spotify link. So I go into Google and I go, find me, Spotify, A Productive Conversation, Marshall Goldsmith. Surely it can find this. Nope. Nope. But you know what it did find? I when I knew what the episode number was,
right,
it found it.
Yep.
So again, there's this tolerance that I think exists there. You've got this balance of something that's got a higher level of precision alongside this area, this natural language that has this breadth to it.
Yeah. And I semi-mockingly, I say that the alphabet is kind of no good. And I mean, the alphabet's a fine thing, and it's been around for a long time. So I don't want to diss the alphabet. But what I mean is that like every job I ever had, long before Johnny Decibel, people put numbers at the front of folders to keep them in order, because we understand as humans that allows you to build a muscle memory.
They're sequential.
They're just sequential.
They're sequential.
They don't move, right? And when someone else comes in and creates a new folder called aardvarks, it doesn't move all of the existing folders, because that's not how we as humans, I think about things. And also, to your point there, what I thought you might have said was that you maybe misremembered the title of the episode or something, because words are, you could use any word. You could use the word finance or budget or spreadsheet or numbers, or, you forget exactly how you referred to a concept. And so when you scan a list of things for something that you want, if you have to remember exactly what you called it last time, I don't think we're very good at that. And we shouldn't be very good at that, because words are fluid and language is fluid. Whereas when you have numbers, and the thing about the Johnny Decimal numbers, once you're in a category and you're looking at your list of numbers, 21.11, 21.12, 21.13, they're all just there. You create them sequentially, so they sit in order. And I think you have to have a certain type of brain, which is why I'd never claim that this is for everybody. Some
Right.
people just don't like this. Some people don't like numbers. That's totally cool. But what I find is for the sort of person for whom numbers are this kind of comforting place, and there's no maths here, right? It's just, we're not doing calculations. It's just a number. But I find, and I think that's part of the appeal of Johnny Decimal, I find that when the right sort of person finds it, it's just this immediate, you can see it, you can feel it in them, like, this is it. This is what I've been looking for.
Well,
And that's immensely satisfying to me.
Well, okay, so this is where you leaned into this a little bit. I'll return to the idea of who it's not for and who it's for, because I mean, there is this, again, propensity for folks when they develop a system that is like this, whether it's a task management, like, because time crafting is not this. Time crafting is a framework to help you, with task management and project management and things of this nature. This is information management. How tempting, because you've seen this, especially with second brain stuff, how tempting has it been, or have you even attempted to say, do I bring other things into this, like task management, like that kind of stuff?
Funny you ask, because it took me a while. I think it's partly an advantage of being a very small business. It's me and my partner Lucy, and we only have limited time, and we're also not workaholics. Like, we quite enjoy, we live on a shoestring, and so we're quite comfortable evolving slowly. And Lucy's an ex-copywriter, and she's got the sort of brain that she will not let something out if it isn't perfect. Mm-hmm. So as a team, we're perfect. I thought I was particular, and I thought I was fussy. You got to meet Lucy, right? Which is brilliant. That's exactly what you want as your other one in a business, because I can tend to be like, oh God, it's the end of a Friday, and we've been working on it for so long, and can we just push the thing out the door? And Lucy says no, because she's a perfectionist. So as a result, that means we have long conversations about things. And that led to, just last year, we recorded it over about 3 months. We recorded a task management course, because it took me that long to figure out how to use it. I thought there's got to be a way to use the system. There has to be some confluence here. And it turns out there is. And it's, funnily enough, there are very close links to time crafting, because when you think about the categories in your system, in the life admin system, that's one of the pre-built systems that we sell. Mm-hmm. There are 5 categories. There's one for you and you and other living things. There's one for where you live and how you get around, transport and so on. There's one for finance. There's one for technology. And there's one for travel and fun and events and so on. So 5 categories. Well, what are there also 5 of? There are 5 days in the week. And so I've built this task management system where on each day of the week, you give some time and attention, just exactly like time crafting, to those 5 categories of things. And it's tied in with the numbers. I use Things for Mac. I just think it's a really lovely app, but you can use it with anything. All of a sudden, because the idea of organizing tasks is the same as the one we spoke about before with organizing files. It's the same. If you just lob a whole bunch of tasks in an unorganized system, you're not going to have a nice time. And so using the Johnny Decimal system with this course we just released, I actually think it's one of the best things we've ever done. I'm really, really proud of it. And as a GTDer, there are heavy GTD influences. As a big fan of Merlin, back from the early days, it's definitely an evolution of many of those things. I don't pretend to have invented radically new concepts. But for the first time in my life, and in 20 plus years of using to-do systems on computers, I've got one that works, that I'm super comfortable with, that acknowledges the reality of how much you're actually going to get done and the fact that you're not going to get it all done. And you just have to choose some things to get done. I call it comfortable awareness, the idea that it's better to at least know what's in your system and to understand what's there way at the back, your wish list, what's down at the bottom that you're never going to get to, but at least to be aware of it and to understand what's there and to have no nasty surprises, because that's what I want from a task management system, is not to think, oh, I forgot to feed the chickens.
That's inbox zero. That's inbox zero.
Right.
You're literally talking about what Merlin meant around inbox zero.
Yeah, right.
And this is the fascinating thing when I see a system, and this is what when I was looking at and we were preparing for this conversation was, I could see the connective tissue between how you could use this with tasks by virtue of the absolute, for lack of a better term, of the area, the ID, the categories. Like those things, again, they're subjective to each of us, but those are objective in that you can tether them to things, OmniFocus, Notion, because what the challenging part is getting people to look there first instead of at the details first, right? And that's because that's what we naturally do. Where do I? It's what we do in this instance, although as humans, like we have to open the fridge door to find the food that's inside. So we know where that is. It's in the fridge, right? And to me, it's so funny because knowing that that's there means that that's the category. Like this is the place where we go to find this stuff. But we don't do that with tasks on our list or projects. We go after the detailed stuff where we get lost in, as opposed to, oh, this is the category it belongs in. Let me go there and see this stuff. So again, when you're talking about that task management aspect, what you're alluding to is an overarching focus for each of your days on those categories, which is the time theming component of time crafting. Yep. And that, and again, to your point, not inherently new, a different spin on things, not unlike attention paths being, a kind of a evolution or inspired by contexts in the form of GTD, which you would argue that IDs, elements of this are contextual, right? And so we look for, I guess I would say, we look for content first and context second, even though our lives would be a whole lot easier if we looked at context first and content second. So how do you, when you're working with others or sharing this, because this has been a hard thing for me to try to get people to do, is because it's human nature to actively look at the details, at the content before the context, although subconsciously or even unconsciously in certain areas of our lives, we do look at context first and then content.
Oh, excuse me. Sorry, I didn't quite get the question. So
no, it's just like, how do you help people like crack that nut around? Okay, this is great. Why are you looking at content first instead of context first? The simplification of this, the system is simple, right? It's just, and the trust aspect obviously is something you have to develop. But old habits die hard, right? Like people do know. Again, another metaphor I'll use is, do you wash your dishes in the bathroom sink? No. Well, why not? You could. Yeah. You totally could, yep. Right? Yep. And in some situations, if your kitchen's under renovation, you have to. Like there's no other place to wash them, right? But would you do that in a practical sense? No, because why? Yeah. The dishes are in the kitchen. There's a sink there. I'll do it here. So contextually, you know that that's where that should happen. But when it comes to our to-do list, we tend to look at the details first and then wonder, well, how did I end up here? Or how come this isn't done or what have you? Yeah. How do you help? How is navigating that? Information aside, because I think information, it's a little bit easier because we're used to file cabinets and so on and so forth. But how do you help people with that? Hey, don't look at the content first. Look at the context first, because it'll make it easier for you to deal with the content.
And that's part of this thing about splitting everything across 5 days and just giving yourself, it's part of, it's back to the idea of reviews, right? The system I've got actually has you doing very small reviews every morning. Because the idea is that you just have a look at that thing. You just check in with it just a little bit to keep this continual awareness over things. And I think we're so good. One of the other things I came up with in that course, which is difficult to do, and I try so hard to do it myself every day, and I fail still. I came up with this idea of be a better human time, which is actually a little bit like what's your horizontal time, right?
Yeah.
It's a similar concept to your horizontal time. And what I try and do is first thing in the morning, I realized you can't do this in the evening. I used to try, I put a thing in my calendar every evening that said, okay, you finish work now. What you should do now to be a better human is to go into your task management system and have a look at some of that stuff that you never get done because you were busy all day, and you should do it now. Well, you're knackered at 4 o'clock. You're never, ever going to do that at 4 or 5 o'clock after a busy day at work. You just want to go outside and crack a beer. And I think there is a false assumption that everybody says you should get up in the morning and the old thing is, right, your brain's fresh and you got to get straight and do your best work, right? And I don't think that's true. Personally, I'm a morning person. I get up and I do my quick review because I'm probably still in my tracksuit and I'm drinking a coffee and I'm not fully awake yet. And the next thing in my calendar every morning is this be a better human time. And what that is an encouragement to me to go into my system, given the day of the week, 13 is a Wednesday, right? Do I want to do my tax filing? Of course not. It's really tedious. And I normally leave it until the last minute. And I know I've got to do it. I've always got to do it. Otherwise I go to jail, right? So it's just a thing I have to do. And so what I try and do in the be a better human time before I start work is to tackle some of that stuff that otherwise gets neglected, because otherwise it doesn't get neglected. It never gets done. And in fact, taxes are not even a fair example because they wouldn't get neglected because I do have to do them at some point.
Yeah.
What I'm talking about here is the stuff that's even a level below that. And that's why I call it be a better human, because if you do these things that you normally never get time for, or you normally never make time for, because as you well understand, things happen in time, nothing can happen not in time, right? I know you speak about this a lot and I couldn't agree more with you. So then if you want to do some of these things that are just better for you, that make you a better person, you just have to choose to do them at some point. And I think pretending you'll do them after you finish work is a folly. You just have to make some time, and I make some time in the morning. Like I say, I'm not very good at it because my natural instinct is to, I'm a little pit bull, right? I want to start work, and I want to do the things that are on my to-do list for work. And so that's the main challenge for me that I haven't found a good way around yet, and I'm still working on that. But that's what I truly think that you will, for me, right? I'm sitting talking to you in Spain, and I would love to have learned more Spanish while I was here. And the only time I'm going to do that is before I start work.
Yeah.
And I haven't, and I'm disappointed in myself. But I'm conscious of that. I keep aware of that, and I keep putting this thing in my calendar, and I keep not ignoring it. And I just have to find ways to recognize that is, that's why it's called be a better human, because if I do these things, I think I'll be a better human.
So for me, because I'm a night owl, I have to, like my morning, I do have that time set aside, but because I'm very well aware that I'm not very good in the mornings, my be a better human thing, for lack of a better term, I think I've called like the morning effect, is I will be social. I will reach out to someone. I'll send them a text. I'll write a card or whatever. Now, how do I do that? This is where, and see, this is as we get close to wrapping up, because we're talking about a framework and approach, but we're not talking about tools, because like you've pointed out, these can be using a myriad of tools, Obsidian, Notion, whatever, right? But I don't use the Apple Reminders app very often at all, except for this kind of stuff.
Interesting. Yes.
Because it's a pattern breaker. It's like, oh, right, I set this reminder because of this, so I have to catch myself as opposed to ignore it. It's no different than, again, James Clear has this habits app called Atoms, and I'm just using the free version. But at a random time, it will message me, say, hey, your habit, and my habit is meditation. Because some things that you schedule And this is why I think hyperscheduling is an issue. If you get too precise with, hey, this is a horizontal theme and I'm going to work on exactly this stuff, your brain will find a way to go, well, is this a version of that thing or whatever? Like you will, because we're predisposed to do that. But if you have something, this is where an external tool like a habit tracking app or something that can break that pattern. And also, and again, you do the front end work. I don't have that interruption happen during, say, a horizontal theme where I know like later in the day I'm focusing on writing. So it'll say, well, when do you want this to arrive? I'm like, well, it has to be before 1 o'clock. So at like some random time at like 10, 12 in the morning, I'll get this thing, hey, don't forget to do this. Now,
nice.
At that point, that's where will and willingness and your ability to be disciplined, you do have to tap into that. It can't be just purely automated. But because it's a different tool and it surprises me to a degree, and it's the only thing that lives in those places, it helps me with that sort of thing. But that's why to me, a system that allows you to trust it in the places that you're putting it. So if you're using Johnny Decimal inside of Obsidian, you can trust that. Then, the more you use it, of course, is how you build trust with it. Then infiltrating your day and integrating it with an Apple reminder or some other kind of reminder to be a better human or to meditate, it has a tendency to allow you to do that because your brain goes, well, I've got all this stuff. Yeah, but I can trust that. It's there. It's going to tell me, whereas this other stuff doesn't. So these are things that we think about, you and I, because we live it. Others that don't live this, but still, need and want to, live in a state of productiveness, they need these reminders. They need to know, oh, well, I have this free tool on my phone. Yeah, you use that. Make that work for you.
It's interesting for people like us who obviously are naturally inclined to this. Otherwise, we wouldn't have chosen it as a career.
Mm-hmm.
It's very interesting. I love my Discord community, and I have just all sorts of people on there. I'll give a shout out to Jade, who I'll send a link, and I know she'll listen to this. She's the opposite person to me, and she doesn't think about these sorts of things all day long. This isn't what she's good at. She's got a different life, and she's better at other things. And I think that's part of what makes this rewarding to me, and that's part of why. Back to one of the first questions there about why I think there's room in the world for all this stuff is because there are people who need this help. There are people who, it sounds ridiculous. Here I am talking about productivity systems in some, highfalutin way. And I know it's not like that, but the world is big and complex and computers have taken over and none of us got any training on these computers. Nobody got given any training on all this stuff. And everything you do now is on a computer. Everything. You can't avoid it. One of the things, it's not related to Johnny Decimal, but they are now replacing parking meters in the street that you used to put a dollar coin in with these things that are now a tiny computer with a screen and you've got to punch your registration number in.
Yep.
Old people can't use them. Old people, and I'm almost one of the old people, and here I am wearing glasses. I can't see in the dark, right? Old people can no longer buy a parking ticket. And that's a perhaps absurd example, but I think that's how I feel about computers broadly. They are everything now in a way that they weren't in the past, and none of us have been given any training.
Well, and think about it this way. I mean, I know when I'm dealing with my mother-in-law or my mother around like signing forms and stuff, they don't.
Oh, man. Yeah.
Right. And then where do they keep them and all that stuff?
What a nightmare.
Right? It's interesting because those people like the boomer generation, not many of them had fax machines. Not many of them did. And then, I mean, I would argue that the fax machine was probably one of the most transitional pieces of tech in that it didn't really take hold in the home, other than the all-in-one printer scanners that would have them or something like that. But they would never really get used because it would tie up your phone line back in the day. But now it's like, hey, we're going to send you this PDF. Can you sign it? Well, how do I sign it? I don't know how do I do that? I don't have a pen that works. So all of these things have happened. But to be able to take a system like Johnny Decimal and go, oh, I can understand this, because you could literally, and any good system should be able to be done digitally and in an analog fashion.
Yep. Print those numbers, stick them on your files at home. There's no reason why not. And that's what the index is for, right? Your index serves to tie all of this together. So if you've got those printed documents, shout out to all my German friends who still have to print a whole bunch of stuff. Apparently, I've seen the photographs.
Mm-hmm.
Stick your Johnny Decimal numbers on, and that's it. Now you've got a single number, a single ID that relates everything in your digital life across all the platforms and your physical life, and it pulls it all together. And I think that's the main power of the system. And I think only getting more and more important as the world goes on. And I don't think a problem that AI is going to solve, because AI is just going to generate more stuff. And I don't think it's going to be good at helping you organize things. It's, for some people, for sure, it's going to. But I think if you're the sort of person who would like to definitively know where a thing is because you put it in a place, and when I go back, I'd like it to be in the same place, I think a system like Johnny Decimal is going to just be more valuable in the future.
I'd argue that you need it now more than ever because of the fact that more information will be coming from things like generative AI that you will need to organize. And so to that end, I mean, when you've got tools like Evernote who are being priced out in terms of the average consumer, and other tools that are like, I mean, Obsidian, as you've mentioned, you and I can navigate it, but it's not exactly user friendly for those that aren't familiar with it. And I mean, we've seen what happens when you put all your eggs into one basket. Evernote would be an example. I need to change tools now and stuff. And that's the other thing too, is that if you have a system that can work with a variety of different tools, digital and analog, all you have to do is transfer the system. So it's the learning curve that you have to take on when you're learning a tool like, say, Amplenote or Notion is going to be higher, but the system you already know. So that will actually help you with the learning curve. So there's so many benefits and we could nerd out about this for hours, but I want to be respectful of both your time and the listeners' time. So Johnny, thanks so much for taking the time to be here today. Where can people...
Thank you for having me, Mike.
Yeah, where can people, first off, learn more about the system and keep up with your work?
JohnnyDecimal.com is the website. There's a blog. If you stick your RSS feeder at that, you'll find it. There is a box to sign up for the mailing list at the bottom of that page. I send a handful of emails a year, not many, so that's worth signing up for. And on there are a few things we sell, mostly pre-made systems so that you don't have to design the thing yourself. We wrote a workbook, was actually the first thing that we created and sold back in 2023. That's now free. So there's a link to that at the bottom of the page as well. That's a 100-page PDF, very step-by-step methodical to build your own system. So a whole bunch of resources there. I'm super available. I answer every email. Thankfully, I don't get that many. There's a forum, there's a Discord, links on the website. So yeah, we're super approachable. We're real people. Just, this is me and my partner Lucy. It's, my name's on the headline, but I can't emphasize enough, this is a team effort, and we have decided just to try and help people, and we would let me know what you need and I will help you.
Well, this is making an impact, and I'm definitely would love to have you back on or talk more about how we can help each other, because I mean, again, like I've said before, it's not a one size fits all. I mean, you could take elements of both time crafting and Johnny Decimal, combine them along with the good old fashioned GTD and even some Eisenhower stuff if you want. Like there's lots of room at the end. Johnny, thanks so much for having a productive conversation with me today.
Thank you, Mike.